They didn't just cut my bonus, they cut my loyalty. That was the line looping in my head the night everything snapped. My name's Ethan Cole, and for 5 years, I was the golden boy of Neuronix Labs, a sleek AI startup in San Francisco that prided itself on being revolutionary. I was the guy who stayed till 3 a.m. tweaking neural weights while the execs slept in their Teslas. The guy who built Synapse, the company's crown jewel, an algorithm that could predict market shifts with eerie precision. And I wasn't just loyal. I believed in what we were building. I believed in her. Melissa Crane, my boss, mentor, and if I'm being honest, my weakness. She was brilliant, razor-sharp, and terrifying in the best possible way. She hired me right out of Stanford, told me I had a mind that could rewire the world, and made me believe it. 4 years, I'd have followed her anywhere. When Neuronix landed its Series C funding, we were promised bonuses, life-changing ones. Melissa looked me straight in the eye at the launch party and said, "You'll finally get what you deserve, Ethan." So imagine my face 2 weeks later, sitting in that glass conference room, as she slid a folder across the table and said, "Budgets are tight. You're lucky to still have a job. No bonus. No acknowledgement. Just a tight smile and a pat on the shoulder." I laughed. Literally laughed out loud, waiting for the punchline. But her eyes didn't waver. "Melissa," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Synapse wouldn't exist without me. You know that." She didn't even blink. "Ethan, we all contribute. Don't make this personal." But it was personal. It always had been. That night, while I sat at my desk staring at the lines of code that made Neuronix millions, I realized something. Every byte of Synapse, every predictive layer, it all lived in my head. I had built the machine, but they owned the cage. Still, I told myself she'd come around. Maybe there was a board decision she couldn't control. Maybe she was protecting me. I kept finding excuses. For her, for the company, for why betrayal always comes wrapped in professionalism. But then I saw the email. A late-night message forwarded to the CFO, time-stamped 3 days before the meeting. The subject line burned into my screen. "Reallocate Ethan Cole's bonus to executive pool." And beneath it, her signature, Melissa Crane. That was the moment the first crack appeared. Something inside me shifted, quiet, sharp, irreversible. Because if loyalty meant nothing to her, then maybe integrity shouldn't mean much to me either. I didn't confront Melissa right away. I told myself there had to be a reason, that maybe she'd been forced into it. I'd seen the pressure she was under, investors breathing down her neck, deadlines shifting like sand. Still, something about that email haunted me. Reallocate Ethan Cole's bonus. It wasn't just business language. It was surgical, cold. But I shoved it down. I needed to believe that the woman who'd built me up wouldn't so easily cut me down. The first red flag came a few days later. We were prepping for a demo with investors. Melissa asked me to tweak Synapse's predictive model, a minor adjustment, she said, to make the projections more digestible. Except the tweak wasn't minor. It changed the algorithm's results entirely, painting a rosier picture of Neuronix's performance. I hesitated. "This will distort the accuracy metrics," I told her. She smiled, too quickly. "It's not a lie, Ethan. It's presentation." I'd seen her charm investors before, but this felt different, manipulative. I ran the change anyway, because that's what loyal people do. But a voice inside whispered, "You're not tweaking data. You're covering her tracks." Then there were the meetings I wasn't invited to. 4 years, I'd been in every major briefing. Suddenly, my calendar looked empty, the kind of quiet that feels deliberate. I'd pass by the glass-walled conference room and catch glimpses of her inside, laughing with Nathan Pierce, a new senior engineer she'd brought in to help scale operations. At first, I didn't think much of it. But soon, Nathan started handling my code, without even asking. He'd leave notes like, "optimization idea," per Melissa's request. per Melissa's request. Each one felt like a hairline fracture in the trust I'd built my career on. When I finally caught her alone in the lab late one evening, I tried to bring it up. "Melissa, am I being sidelined?" I asked, forcing a smile I didn't feel. She didn't look up from her laptop. "You're overthinking, Ethan. Take a few days off. You've been burning out." That hit harder than I expected. Take a few days off, the polite execution of anyone who'd outlived their usefulness. But when she finally met my eyes, I saw something I couldn't name. Guilt. Fear. Or worse, indifference. I left the lab with my badge feeling heavier than usual, the walls of Neuronix suddenly foreign. Something was happening behind those sleek glass doors, something I wasn't meant to see. And for the first time, I wondered if Synapse wasn't the only thing she'd been programming all along. Maybe she'd been rewriting me. I used to think betrayal came like thunder. Loud, dramatic, impossible to ignore. But it doesn't. It comes quietly, in the hum of a server room at midnight. 2 weeks after Melissa told me to take a few days off, I returned to find my workstation wiped. My access revoked. My name stripped from the Synapse commit logs. At first, I thought it was a system error. Then I saw the announcement on the company intranet. Neuronix Labs unveils Synapse V2, spearheaded by Chief Engineer Nathan Pierce. Nathan. The rookie she'd brought in. The one who couldn't even interpret half my code 6 months ago. And there, in the press photo, Melissa, her arm around him, smiling for the cameras. My chest went cold. I opened the new build and dug through the back end. The framework was mine. Every function, every predictive module, every sleepless night coded into those lines, all mine. Only now, the author tags had been changed. Rewritten. By Nathan Pierce, the metadata read. I felt something inside me fracture. This wasn't just theft, it was erasure. Melissa had taken my life's work, stripped my name, and handed it to someone else. I scrolled deeper into the logs, desperate for proof, until I found a hidden directory labeled Legochu, the kind of digital graveyard where you bury what you don't want found. Inside were old emails between Melissa and the board. The first one hit like a blade. "We need to phase Ethan out before launch. He's too emotionally attached to Synapse, a liability. Nathan can replicate his framework. I'll handle the transition." Another. "If we cut Ethan's bonus early, it'll push him to resign on his own. Clean exit, no backlash." So it had all been planned. The missing meetings. The bonus. The replacement. Every piece placed with surgical precision. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the glowing monitor. I wanted to scream, to smash something, to demand an explanation. But what good would that do? In her eyes, I wasn't a partner anymore. I was a problem solved. That realization didn't come with rage. It came with stillness, the kind of quiet that feels like standing in the eye of a hurricane. I copied everything. Every chat, every timestamp, every buried file, onto a single encrypted drive. When I walked out of Neuronix that night, the city lights looked sharper somehow, crueler. Melissa Crane had taken everything I'd built and turned it into her empire. But she'd forgotten one thing. The architect always keeps the blueprints. And as the elevator doors closed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Calm, deliberate, and colder than I'd ever seen. That was the moment revenge stopped being an idea. For 3 days after I walked out of Neuronix, I didn't touch a keyboard. My apartment looked like a server crash. Half-eaten takeout boxes, blackout curtains drawn tight, monitors still glowing with frozen lines of code. I just sat there, replaying her words, her smile, that damned press photo. Melissa Crane, my mentor, my compass, had written me out of my own story. Sleep didn't come. Food tasted like dust. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing beside Nathan, basking in my creation like it was hers. I tried to tell myself to move on, to forget it. But the thing about building intelligence, artificial or otherwise, is you start to understand patterns. And betrayal has one. The collapse came on the third night. I opened the folder of photos from the early days, the late-night coffee runs, the whiteboard scribbles, her notes in the margins. "You're the future, Ethan." It hit like static. Grief, anger, humiliation, all tangled together. I smashed my coffee mug against the wall, glass shattering across the floor. For a second, I thought I'd hit bottom. Then something flickered on one of the old monitors. A message. Backup completed. Synapse Core version 1.0. Author, E. Cole. My breath caught. The original framework. My framework. Still intact, buried deep in an old local repository. I clicked it open. There it was, untouched. Clean, brilliant, perfect. The heartbeat of everything Melissa had stolen. And in that moment, something shifted. The pain didn't disappear, it calcified. Hardened into clarity. She hadn't just stolen my code. She'd stolen years of my life and rewritten them as her own. But code, like truth, leaves traces. And I knew every one of them. My hands stopped shaking as I began to map out what I'd do next. Not a tantrum. Not sabotage. Precision. Melissa taught me to think like an engineer, to isolate the flaw, exploit the weakness, and rebuild from the wreckage. So that's what I'd do. I'd show her that the mind she tried to erase still existed, sharper, colder, unbound. I backed up the original algorithm to 3 drives, encrypted them under new names, and slid one into the lining of my jacket. Then I stared at my reflection in the dark monitor, a ghost lit by neon code. Justice, I whispered, almost to myself. But on my terms. No more begging for acknowledgement. No more loyalty to people who thrived on betrayal. Melissa wanted to teach me that loyalty meant nothing in this world. Fine. Then she'd learn what it means when nothing is left to lose. I powered down the screen, slipped on my coat, and stepped into the night. The rebuild had begun. I stopped pretending this was about spite. Revenge, I decided, had to be surgical. Messy theatrics would only feed Melissa's PR machine. If I was going to take everything back, my code, my name, my life, it would be with patience, proof, and leverage. First, evidence. The buried emails and the Legochu directory were my cornerstone, but emails can be dismissed, logs can be doctored. I needed witnesses, corroboration, and a narrative that could survive an exec's lawyers. So I called Maya Ortiz, an old teammate who'd left Neuronix 2 years earlier to go into corporate compliance. Maya still owed me favors, and she still moved in circles that left paper trails. She agreed to meet in an unremarkable cafe and listened without flinching as I laid out the files. Her face went stone cold. "This is enough to start an internal inquiry," she said. "But we'll need a chain of custody." Translation. Procedural patience. Next. Allies. I reached out quietly to Julian Park, an old classmate now at Argent Systems, a rival that had been sniffing Synapse for months. Julian hadn't forgotten the nights he and I had debugged models in a cramped lab. He didn't offer money, not yet, but he offered desire. Argent wanted Synapse in their stack. I didn't need a buyer right away. I needed an audience who would pay attention when I cut the feed. Julian agreed to listen, to keep options open, and to provide a pressure valve, a realistic place to land the algorithm if the time came. Then the traps. Nothing technical or illegal, just leverage. I began to seed questions with HR and compliance channels, anonymized tips about code ownership and unattributed contributions. I fed public forums subtle pushes about ethics in AI attribution. I arranged for Maya to file a formal request for an audit under a confidentiality clause that would force the board to respond in writing. Each bureaucratic step forced Melissa and the board to reveal themselves on record. Denials, evasions, promises. Paper begets paper. Paper becomes evidence. Emotionally, I weaponized proximity. I reached out to teammates who'd been quietly sidelined, a junior dev whose promotion evaporated, a data scientist passed over for a conference talk. They weren't saints, they were angry, and anger is powerful currency. Over a week of coffees and late-night messages, I turned small resentments into a network of corroborators who could testify to a pattern. Melissa's deliberate sidelining, Nathan's sudden authorship, the board's quieting of dissent. While I built the coalition, I polished the product. I forked Synapse V1 into a clean, portable package, not to hand over carelessly, but to prove that the original algorithm still functioned exactly as I described. I documented every test, every metric, every timestamp. If they claimed provenance, I would show provenance. When the pieces were in place, legal channels primed, witnesses lined up, a sympathetic rival ready to listen, I sat back and watched Melissa operate as if nothing had changed. She tweeted triumphs. She took interviews. She wore my creation like jewelry. I lit the last cigarette, looked at the encrypted drives in my desk, and felt the old adrenaline return. The calm was a lie. Beneath it, a storm was building. Soon, the world that had rewritten me would be forced to read the original blueprint. Something big was about to explode. They always think they've won because they control the narrative. I learned to steal that narrative back. The morning everything blew up began like any other. Polished investors, talking points, camera angles. Except instead of walking into Neuronix's glass lobby, I walked into a conference room at Argent Systems with Maya, Julian, and two lawyers who smelled like subpoenas. Julian pressed play on a projector. What filled the screen wasn't rhetoric, it was proof. The buried Legochu directory, the board emails, the altered commit logs, and most damning, a chain of cryptographically time-stamped backups I'd made months earlier. The metadata matched my identity, local timestamps, machine IDs, and a signature string only I would have left in the code as a joke, a string Melissa had never thought to scrub. An expert from Argent spoke calmly. This architecture is not replication. It's provenance. At the same time, Maya, armed with the formal audit request she'd filed, sent the board's evasive replies and the email where Melissa explicitly ordered my bonus reallocation to several regulatory bodies and a tech ethics reporter with a reputation for ruthless accuracy. The reporter called. He smelled blood. Neuronix tried to play damage control. Their PR feed went into overdrive. No impropriety, an internal review, the company's commitment to ethics. Melissa gave an interview about leadership and vision. Nathan tweeted gratitude. Then Argent dropped the second coin. They published a technical brief comparing Synapse V2 to the annotated V1 blueprint I'd handed them under NDA. Not the full IP, but enough to show identical unique heuristics and the same idiosyncratic variable names I'd used in early builds. The brief was clinical. The internet tore through it like a surgeon. The board froze. Investors demanded answers. Regulators opened inquiries. Neuronix's stock hiccuped, then plummeted as clients pulled pilots pending investigation. Nathan vanished from public life. Melissa's smile, that weaponized calm, began to crack. They tried to sue. Neuronix filed for injunctions. Melissa accused Argent of corporate theft. But the evidence wasn't a he said she said. It was timestamps, internal memos, sworn depositions from sideline teammates, and Maya's recorded testimony about the board's plan. Each denial from Melissa only added new footnotes to the indictment. The most cutting moment came during a closed-door deposition when Melissa, confronted with her own email ordering Ethan phased out, reached for plausible deniability and found none. Her hands trembled the way mine had the night I first saw the announcement photo. The legal team looked at her like a discovery. The cameras outside waited like vultures. By noon the board had issued an emergency statement. Melissa Crane was stepping down pending an independent investigation. Nathan was placed on leave. The press photo of them arm in arm was replaced across the web with headlines about ethics, theft, and leadership failure. But the punishment that fit her sin wasn't just professional. Melissa had built her power on people's trust. She traded loyalty for optics. The downfall mirrored the theft. By the end of the day she had a title and a resume and nothing that tied anyone to her name with respect. Colleagues who'd once hung on her every word now crossed the street to avoid her. I stood at a distance and watched the storm settle into glass shards. The cameras were loud. The elevators were quieter than I expected. In the empty executive suite, a single photo still sat on Melissa's desk. The launch night, her arm around me, my younger face bright with faith. She picked it up, turned it over, and set it face down alone. Outside, the city moved on. Inside me, the silence was different this time. Not numb, but full. Justice had been messy, public, and irreversible. I didn't smile. I felt something sharper. The knowledge that when people rewrite the truth, the original author can always read the margins. For Melissa, the applause had ended. For me, they say the world revenge finally remembered a name. Maybe they've never had their name stolen. It's been 6 months since Neuronix collapsed under its own hypocrisy. The investigation bled the company dry. Lawsuits, investor withdrawals, terminated contracts. What was once the darling of Silicon Valley turned into a cautionary tale whispered at conferences. Melissa Crane's name still trends sometimes, usually attached to words like ethics violation, code theft, and leadership scandal. She tried to pivot, consulting, a rebranding, even a book deal, but the industry has a long memory and no mercy. When trust is your currency, one exposed lie bankrupts you forever. Nathan. He disappeared after testifying. Rumor says he took a job overseas under a different surname. Maybe he'll find peace somewhere his resume doesn't follow him. Maybe he won't. As for me, I didn't take over Neuronix, and I didn't want to. Power wasn't the goal. I just wanted truth restored, and it was. Argent Systems acquired Synapse legally, through the proper channels this time. They offered me a leadership role. I accepted, not out of spite, but clarity. Some nights I stay late, like the old days. I walk past rows of servers humming quietly, their soft blue light reflecting in the glass. Synapse still runs. Cleaner now, more transparent. Every line of code bears my name again, properly. And yet, even surrounded by vindication, there's an echo I can't shake. Because the hardest part of revenge isn't the act itself. It's realizing that once you've destroyed the person who betrayed you, there's no one left to hate. I saw Melissa once after the fallout. She was sitting alone outside a coffee shop, hair pulled back, eyes scanning nothing. She looked up when I passed, like she recognized me. For a heartbeat, I almost stopped. Almost. But there was nothing left to say. We both already knew the truth. She'd built her empire on manipulation, and I dismantled it with precision, using every lesson she'd taught me. Poetic justice, I guess. She taught me to code, to plan, to think ahead. I just applied those lessons to her. The last time I walked past the old Neuronix building, its sign had been stripped clean, just outlines where letters used to be. Fitting, I thought. That's what she'd tried to do to me. Erase the name, keep the structure. Now the structure's gone. And my name remains. I learned something in all this. Not every betrayal deserves forgiveness, but every truth deserves exposure. Because in a world built on algorithms and lies, sometimes the most human act is revenge served with integrity. Have you ever trusted someone who twisted your loyalty into their advantage? Tell me in the comments. I read every story, and yours might inspire the next one. And if you want more tales of karma, justice, and redemption, make sure to subscribe, because sometimes, the truth deserves a sequel.